Welcome back. You're still watching Tonight, and with Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury, John Mbadi, we want to have a conversation about various measures that are being introduced or being proposed by his office. But first, Waziri, there are those that think you took advantage of the Gen Z sort of protests for you to be in government. Why are you in government?
You know, Sam, that you can ask the appointing authority.
What happened between the protest and your appointment?
I don't think I'm appointed just as a consequence of protest. Probably there could have been discussions before that. But the appointing authority has been very clear that he wanted a broad-based government. He had realized that now he needs to bring Kenyans together. So the philosophy around that, it is him who can respond. You know, my party leaders, I'm still a member of ODM, has said categorically that he was approached and that to give some of his members to go to the cabinet. Again, the two gentlemen can respond to that.
Did you ever see this coming? Because you're the person affected here. Did you ever see this coming?
Not really. I think it came as a shock. There were rumors, of course, towards the days leading to the nomination. But I will tell you, 3 months ago from today, if you ever told me that I would be a CS, I would think it was a dream. So I didn't see it coming. It was a shock. Rumors were there towards that date, but they were just rumors.
I spoke to you in this same studio on 18th of June, and we were reviewing the actions that have been taken by Kenya Kwanza Parliamentary Group at State House. You are with the chairperson of the Finance and Planning Committee, whom you report to in terms of parliamentary issues. Did you ever think at that time that you'd be part of the solution to the challenges that were being witnessed at the time?
Well, at that time I had no idea that I would be in government soon. But again, you can't rule out anything. I'm a Kenyan, I'm competent, I'm qualified, I have my credentials. I wouldn't rule out anything. Yeah. But as to whether I had any idea that such an appointment would come, I had zero idea.
All right. And let's talk about, because I think it's just towards the end of last week, you spoke to Emmanuel of Citizen TV, and you said that there are measures that you're considering to bring to Parliament, is it 47 or 49 clauses? Why do you want to bring back eco-levy that was rejected by Kenyans?
I think, let me be clear, eco-levy is not one of the things that we are considering to bring, for your information, Sam. I think the way the whole thing was reported, I only asked a question because Emmanuel was asking me that eco-levy is contentious, that multinationals, actually use the word multinationals, are complaining. So I asked, why are they complaining? Because I wanted to understand why they have a problem with eco-levy. You know, there are people who have argued that eco-levy is desirable or needs to be brought because of environmental issues. So I just asked a question. I didn't say it is one of the clauses that are considered.
Yep.
But let me be very clear and categorical, because I don't want to appear like I'm ambiguous on these things. First, we are not bringing back Finance Bill 2024. That should go out very clearly. It's dead. It's buried. It is withdrawn. There were so many clauses in that bill that were offensive. Kenyans rejected them, and therefore they have no space under my regime as Cabinet Secretary in charge of National Treasury and Economic Planning. I have made it very clear to the President that cannot be brought under my leadership as the Cabinet Secretary. We have issues of eco-levy, we have left it out because, we are not considering it because, one, there are any issue that was contentious, we want to put those to abeyance. Even if they will come, they will come later, not at this point in time. We have issues with the vehicle circulation, motor vehicle circulation, issues with taxing bread, issues of sanitary pads, issues like financial transactions, issues like money transfers. All those, we have said, anything that Kenyans had issues with and felt that was oppressive to them, are out of the table.
But what are you considering to bring back?
But I would tell you that there are so many provisions in that bill that really were not contentious. Some of them very progressive, some. what I'm as the cabinet secretary in charge of national security is saying that legislation is continuous. I understand Kenyans perfectly well. That, you know, if, for example, today you're walking and then you're bitten by a snake. Anytime you pass there and even a grass touches your foot, your feet, you would jump.
Right.
So Kenyans are so fearful that when they hear that there are some tax measures, they get afraid. But I will tell you this, that what I think we need to emphasize on is that legislations will be there. We cannot say that henceforth we are not going to bring any legislations. Even today, legislations go to parliament.
Right.
What we must emphasize and push, and which I will push, is public participation, public engagement. Explain things, let people understand, let them comment. If it is bad, take it off. If it is good, let it proceed. And
so
that
what,
is
what are you considering bringing back?
Many things. Not bringing back as such, but what I'm saying that there are provisions in that bill which were progressive. For example, Sam, I would ask, why would one reject amendment to excise duty to increase excise duty on imported sugar from 5 shillings to 7.5 shillings per kilogram to protect our sugar industry? Why would one reject that? Just because it was in the finance bill of 2024? Those are progressive provisions in the law. Why would one reject...
Doesn't that make sugar more expensive for consumers?
Imported sugar.
I know, but
we are protecting... Just a minute.
Yeah.
We are promoting our local industry. Today, I hear, and the statistics will come out, that because of some of the intervention in the sugar industry, the production of sugar locally has gone up. And one of the reasons why our sugar industries are dying, why we have to buy sugar sometimes expensively, import sugar from outside, is because we have not protected that industry sufficiently enough. So any initiative to support and promote that industry should be our priority. Create more jobs.
You know, Waziri, your predecessor, when he stood before Parliament in the year 2023, June, said that the levy of 5 shillings per kilo on imported sugar was being introduced because of cases of diabetes. Has the reasoning changed now to protectionism?
That was him. Have I said because of diabetes we are doing that?
I'm citing the statement of the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury.
This is another regime. So ask me what I have said.
That's interesting, but what I'm asking is, your predecessor who held the office you hold today said the reason was diabetes. You're here saying that you're increasing from 5 shillings to 7.5 shillings per kilo because you want to protect the local industry.
So I am responsible for what I'm saying. We want to protect our sugar industry. That's why we are revamping them. I don't want Sony sugar to go down. I want Mumia's sugar to be revived. I want Jemele's sugar to function, Muhoroni and all the rest.
Okay.
So for me, it is important that we protect our local manufacturing sector. Because one of the reasons why the young generation are going to the city, because they don't have jobs. Jobs can only be created in manufacturing industry. So agriculture should support job creation. That's why we must produce more sugar cane.
Okay.
To produce more sugar.
On that particular day, 18th of June, you said something to be about protectionism. Can you listen to it?
Yes, I can.
Let's listen to what Waziri said about protecting local industries through taxation.
To me, this protectionist approach is not going to be so useful for this economy. I don't think there is anywhere where protecting industries is the only way to help them compete or become competitive in the market. What we need to do is to look at why is it that goods that are being manufactured here, how come they cannot compete with goods that come miles away from Kenya? It's because of our factors of production. The factors of production in Kenya is expensive. Begin with energy, which is the single most important input in any productive process or in any manufacturing process.
So that was you just over 2 months ago. You have a different story today.
No, that has not changed. Let me just explain to you, Sam. One of the reasons why our industries are struggling is because of cost of production, including the sugar industry. And I will tell you one of the reasons why our sugar industries are struggling is because, look, compare it to Sudan. The nuclear of the factory is much, much bigger. In fact, you would combine so many factories in Kenya to be equivalent to that. So that is one. The energy sector must be worked on so that the cost of production is low. But again, if there are some tax measures that would protect us from, protect the country from becoming a dumping ground. Yeah. Because it is one thing to compete and it is another to dump. So we don't want Kenya to be a dumping ground for products out there. So it is important for us to look at our tax regime, and some of them can help us promote our local manufacturing sector. I still want to insist during my vetting, I said one way of creating jobs is to shift from looking at agriculture as an end in itself to make agriculture support system for manufacture. And that is what we are doing. So I was asking another question. Why would one resist an amendment that would increase, give more days for tax amnesty? Tax amnesty. Why would one
just before we move to tax amnesty, I want to a little bit stick on the question of sugar, because you see, this is a sector that has struggled for so long. Yeah. And I'm just wondering, how does the taxing imported sugar help an industry that is not able to sustain the local demand?
Sam, I wish you understood me. I said the data will be out, that some of the government interventions, recent interventions, have resulted in increased production of sugar.
To what capacity now?
Maybe I need to get the figures, but it is there. It is in the government statistics.
And I'm looking at them right now, just for information. The national demand, this is a sugar report filed by the task force that was looking into it under President Uhuru Kenyatta's regime. The national demand was 1.01 metric tons. The local production was 490,000 metric tons, which is less than 50%. The deficit was 521,000 metric tons, meaning much of it was imported. If you had to look at the current production at that time of cane in the country, was 4.75 million metric tons. The requirement was double, 9.84 million tons. But the sector in the country could only produce 1.09 metric tons. So you're looking at an industry that is already struggling to sustain the demand.
So those are statistics for which period?
I'm talking about the 2018. The statistics that were given by the task force.
So Sam, are we in 2018 or we are in 2020?
In fact, if you had to look at the figures...
Let me put it this way. The recent interventions, and I said, I was very specific, the recent interventions have increased production of sugar. If we do much more, which we are doing, by the way, one of the things is the reforms in the sugar sector. There's a problem with the bill at the Senate, which I hope will be resolved quickly. I don't know whether it has been passed, the sugar bill. We are likely now to grow and produce more sugar, which may meet our local demand. What we are interested in is also to discourage the dumping of sugar in this country, cheap sugar, which then kill the local production. So those are the things that we must do. I am not saying that the demand has not been higher than the supply. It has been. We know that. And it has been there, those statistics. But there is recent interventions, including the privatization of the sugar industries, which we want to do. So if this bill can be dealt with and passed as is required, and then other interventions are implemented, then we will have a sugar industry that is thriving. Remember, I also come from a sugar growing area. So I must protect that industry. Yes.
That's interesting about protectionism that you spoke about. But tell me more about the other clauses that you want to bring on board.
No, I just mentioned that there are quite a number of issues that we need to bring forward. One is the tax amnesty. Tax amnesty is where both parties benefit, the taxpayers and the government.
And what are you targeting to raise from that?
Well, last year we raised 43 billion shillings.
This year?
This year we were targeting to raise, it could be as low as 30, as high as 50 billion shillings. But the issue here is not just about raising taxes, it's about compliance. You see, there's people who have tax arrears, and these tax arrears have accumulated penalties and interest to the extent that they get frustrated, the taxpayers. One of the objectives of our tax policy is to make tax payment humane and have taxpayers comply. So we give them opportunity to pay the principal tax and not to pay penalties and interest. So that, to me, is beneficial to both sides.
Okay.
It generates revenue to the government by enhancing tax compliance and also to the taxpayers. Why would one object to that? I will give you another one. Pension. And this is not bringing money. This is taking away money. You see, our pension is taxable. But if you reach the age of 65, then you don't pay tax on pension. So what some Kenyans do is once they retire at the age of 60, they leave their pension until the 65 years. So for 5 years, someone is exposed. A senior citizen who has served this country for so many years is exposed because he's trying to be clever, which is not right. So what we are saying is that this money, that this pension needs to be released without any tax paid on it. So those were provisions that were in the Finance Bill 2024, and we think some of these provisions should be brought back.
All right. So when you look at it in the totality of it, what you're working on already, how much are you targeting to raise?
Well, the figures are still not really computed because our team is still working on them, but we were thinking that they could bring in 150 billion shillings. But I want to be very clear, the issue here is not raising funds. The issue here is making, one, business environment better, and two, streamlining the tax policies. Basically. It's not just about raising money. If we look at it as a means of raising money, then we lose the point.
Okay, all right. And we'll be hoping... So when do you plan to introduce that to...
No, we don't have timelines. You know, these are, I said, legislation some...
True, it is continuous, but if you have a plan, there must be some timelines they're looking at, because...
Well, first of all, we may not even bring it as one bill.
Okay.
Because there are some bills which maybe affect what I would call trade and industry. They could be brought under trade and industry. You know, Kenyans are obsessed with this omnibus bill or finance bill every year. The finance bill of 2024 failed. You can't resuscitate it. It's a dead horse.
What format will these proposals take?
You know, that is something that we have to determine and even agree with the cabinet and even have the Attorney General's input. This is a work in progress. There's someone who probably, I don't know who, trying to bring this as an emergency. There is no emergency. We have a legal framework in place to collect our taxes.
And that's
so there is no emergency. What we are saying is that certain things that were progressive, we must look for a way of bringing them back in a way that would help in promoting growth and helping streamline tax administration.
And that's why we have you here to clarify some of those issues.
Yes.
Have you heard of Data Point?
Data Point?
Yes.
What about that?
I'll tell you about it. And that is in regards to the situation about education in this country, especially looking at the money allocated. So we're looking at the figures, Waziri, in as far as the estimates as they were before the budget cuts. And the first one, we are looking at the much allocated to the education sector. 656 billion shillings is the global figure. 55% of that, or 358 billion shillings, goes to the Teacher Service Commission for financing the employment of teachers, their salaries as well. Basic education is allocated 142.3 billion shillings, higher education 128 billion shillings, and TVET is allocated 30.7 billion shillings. If you were to look at the education sector at the higher level, HELB was to receive 35.9 billion shillings. University scholarship was to be allocated 16.9 billion shillings. TVET capitation and scholarship was to take 7.7 billion shillings. Beyond that, for the free primary education, this is a program that has existed since 2003. It was allocated 9.1 billion shillings. For the free day secondary education, 61.9 billion shillings. We'll be looking at the specific allocations per learner. The junior secondary schools that received 30.7 billion shillings, and examination fees were allocated at 5 billion shillings. Then still on the education sector, this is the capitation per learner. If you're in primary, meaning you're benefiting from free primary education, every learner is allocated 1,420 shillings per year. In the secondary school sector, you receive 22,244 shillings per learner. For the junior secondary school, they receive 15,000 shillings per learner. But there's supposed to be a schedule of how resources are released to the schools. 50% should go to the schools in term 1, 30% should go to the schools in term 2, 20% should go to the schools in term 3. Most times, school heads complain that that doesn't happen. But there are other sources of financing in the education sector, and that is to do the bursaries that are divided across different sources. The national government, CDF kitty, you have 35 to 40% of kitties in different constituencies being allocated for bursaries. And of course, the total allocation for the current financial year is 54.7 billion shillings. This is, of course, after the cuts that were implemented by Parliament. Then, obviously, we are talking about, if you have to take this figure of 54.7 billion shillings, 40%, which is an estimate, would give you 21.8 billion shillings going to the education sector, specifically on bursaries. Beyond that, there's more financing that comes from the National Government Affirmative Action Fund that goes through women representatives. Current total allocation for the fund is 3.3 billion shillings. A bit of it goes to financing education. And then county governments as well, they have bursaries that also go to learners. There are other scholarships by financial institutions, private and otherwise. But also these are some of the questions that are emerging, including what the Chief Justice is talking about this evening, about the situation we are in. So many sources of funds distributed across the different sectors, yet education is still unaffordable. There's that feeling, Waziri, that especially if you had to look at the university funding model, it sounds discriminatory. How do you respond?
Well, you see, in terms of that policy around university funding model, I think the right person who would address that is the Ministry of Education. I don't have facts about it. Okay. Personally, what I would know is that now is how much we may be required to give, which we did, to fund it. So as to how they get the bands from band 1 to band 5, that is an operational issue. That's administrative. To me, you could invite here the relevant officers of government to deal with that. I may not be competent to handle that.
And since you've been there, well, it's a short time of 2 weeks, but then again, if you look at the schedule of releasing resources, 50, 30, 20 to the schools capitation, what have you seen? What is the challenge that schools are not able to receive resources at the right time, and how do you plan to correct it?
You know, the resources that you'd be talking about is now for the term 3. And that is what I would answer. If there's
but there's already a backlog.
For the previous years, I really don't think we have a backlog in the first 50, 30. We may be required just to release the 20%. But of course, the reason why there would be challenges of financing anything in this country is the issue of revenue collection. You can only release what you have. You can not release exchequer which you don't have. Can I just tell you something, Sam? How much did we collect last year as revenue?
2.4 trillion? 2.4
trillion. Out of that, if that is the money that we would collect this year, out of that, 1.1 would go into paying, servicing our debts. So that leaves you with 1.3. The 1.3 remove, let me say CFS as a whole, debts and constitution office holders and pension is 1.203. So that leaves you the 1.2. Salaries, the wage bill, the salary, the payroll bill per day, per month is 75 billion. That is 900 billion per month, per year. So remove that from 1.2, you remain with about 300 billion. And you have other recurrent expenditure to the tune of 400 billion. So already we have exhausted.
So what is the solution? Why are we budgeting for resources we don't have?
Solution is one, we reduce our budgets, our expenditure, which we can only reduce to a limit. But the best solution for Kenya now, if you ask me, because we are not going to lay off staff overnight to recut on the salaries of 90 billion. We are not going to say we are not paying our debts. We have to pay the loans. So those two have to be paid. Recurrent expenditure, you can only reduce to a limit. Where we have reached, we are almost at the bare minimum. So the only solution is to raise more revenue. And that raising of more revenue, Kenyans, and I am in that school of thought, we cannot increase the rates every day. We must have tax certainty, tax predictability. So we must at one point say we operate with the tax rates that we have. Now, the only way to do it is therefore to make sure that the current system is strong enough to remove leakages, tax leakages, to reform the Kenya Revenue Authority. And that is why you can see my first assignment in that ministry has been KRA. I have had engagement with the senior management of KRA. I had engagement with the entire staff. Most of them were watching me virtually.
Right.
They even contributed virtually. They gave ideas. They asked me questions. I responded to them. We interacted. And I have followed through to see where they have reached. Phase 1 of digitization has kicked off.
Right.
We must make sure that we automate revenue collection. We must make sure that staff morale is boosted. We must make sure that we deal with governance issues at KRA. We must make sure that the interaction between KRA and taxpayers is that of customer relationship, not adversarial. So there are a lot of things that we must do.
So how much would we save by sealing the leakages?
We think if we seal all the leakages and reform KRA as we would want it to perform, we should not collect less than 600 billion more. 600 billion. Because look at VAT sum, value-added tax. We are collecting only 3% of GDP. It should be in the region of about 6%. So it means we are collecting about 50% of VAT. If you walk to Luthuli Avenue, you will be given two prizes. If you're buying an electronic there, you will be given 2 prizes, one for ETR and another one if you don't want to pay tax. Some, I'm sure you have encountered some of these things. Look at the rental income. Rental income tax is another area where there is an abuse. How many landlords pay tax in this country? Probably you are also a landlord. How much do you pay as tax? So these are issues that we must seal these loopholes.
Right.
And make sure that all the money that we collect come to the government, to the exchequer.
All right.
Then we can address some of these problems.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Sounds like quite a task that you have ahead of you, but we'll be getting to that conversation as we continue with the show. But first, you're taking a short break. Here is what's coming up. Remember, the Cabinet Secretary remains in studio. So much to cover, including the public debt question and so much more. Stay tuned for that.